Well, thank you all. Thank you all for being here tonight, and welcome to our November reading of the in the Milwaukie Poetry Series. I'm Tom Hogan, and I'm the director of the Milwaukie Poetry Series, which is a program of the Ledding Library. One thing I should tell you, well, two things. We are bringing some more chairs in, so Scott Walker, the drama teacher, is going to be bringing some chairs in, and we're experimenting with the mic too. We thought first we weren't going to use it, but now I think I'm going to use it, and I think Ursula is going to use it when she starts to read. So it's great to see you all here. What a wonderful crowd they are tonight. You want to give yourselves a hand, please? Thank you all for being here, and it's just terrific to see this many people here for a poetry reading. I want to start with some thanks, because there are a lot of thanks to pass around. First, since we are a program sponsored by the City of Milwaukie, we want to thank the City of Milwaukie and the City Council. Let's give them a hand, please. Because the City of Milwaukie is supporting this series. Secondly, we're a program of the Ledding Library, so we want to thank the Ledding Library, and Katie Newell, the library director, was there at the door handing out the broadsides when you came in. So, yeah, can we give the library a hand too? And thirdly, the poetry committee. We have a terrific poetry committee. And as you know, with teamwork, there isn't a program that you can run unless you have great teamwork. And we have a poetry committee of 8, and most of the people are here tonight as well. So I don't know if I'm going to ask them to stand. Can we give the poetry committee a hand too, please? So it gives me a lot of pleasure, and we're delighted to have Ursula here. Reading with us. We've been excited since she said yes, that she would come to read. Ursula Le Guin writes, as we know, both prose and poetry, and in various modes, including realistic fiction, science fiction, fantasy, young children's books, books for young adults, screenplays, essays, verbal texts, and voice texts. She has published 7 volumes of poetry, 22 novels, over 100 short stories, collected in 11 volumes, 4 collections of essays, 12 books for children, and 4 volumes of translation. Few American writers have done work of such high quality in so many forms. In poetry, Ursula was a finalist for the Oregon Book Award in Poetry in 2012 for Out There, Poems and Images from Steens Mountain Country. That's a book with Roger Dorband, who did the photography. Her latest book of poetry is Finding My Elegy, New and Selected Poems. Most of her major titles have remained continuously in print, some for over 40 years. 3 of her books have been finalists for the American Book Award and the Pulitzer Prize. And among the many honors her writing has received a National Book Award, 5 Hugo Awards, 5 Nebula Awards. I have a list of awards here. And at the end of the list it says, etc. Her work has received a number of awards over the years. She was born in Berkeley, California. She went to Radcliffe College and did graduate work at Columbia University. She and her husband, Charles, have lived in Portland since 1958. Would you join me in welcoming to Milwaukie and to the Milwaukie Poetry Series our poet tonight, Ursula Le Guin. Ursula? Yeah.
You got that on the mic. Okay. So look me up. Is it on there? Oops. Sorry. Okay, that should stay. As long as you don't move it around, it'll be good.
It's in my line of vision.
Okay. Down.
Down.
Oops.
I have a very small head.
You can kind of squeeze the metal things in, it bends to you, so.
How's that? Is that getting all the way back? Okay, if it's not, if it slips or something, start jumping up and down. Making loud, raucous noises. It's weird. Okay, I'm going to be reading from Finding My Elegy because it has old poems and new poems in it. And it's kind of fun to be able to do the both. And I hope I can find my way around the reading I plan. I write about, my writing seems to sort of eventually group itself into certain topics, among which are a lot of animals and a lot of trees, but I'm not going to be doing them tonight. This first set I'm going to read of poems is, I don't know quite how to describe it. It's sort of about ecology, the condition of the world, not just the human world, and about war. And it's about distress and relief, I guess. So this is the first poem in the new section of Finding My Elegy. It's called Distance. If we refuse the notion of away, could we relearn the truth of far? We deny distance, busy filling it with what we throw out of the car, paving the house of Shiva with our shit, scumming Poseidon's silver hair with tar, fouling the quail's nest. Away is where we live, and here is where we are, a long distance from the nearest star. I guess that's the science fiction part of me. Okay, this is probably the gloomiest poem of the whole lot tonight. It's called Extinction. And the form it's in is called a villanelle, which those of you who practice, have the vice of poetry, will know what that is. It's a very complicated little form. And this is the shortest line villanelle that I know. Imagine dark, 40 years rain, the sinking ark. No dogs bark or doves complain in the long dark. No eel or shark noses in vain the ribs of the ark. No star, no spark, no full or wane, silence and dark. Without mark, without stain, bright, stark, the ocean's arc is bare again above the dark, the sunken ark. This one's called Soldiers. When I was young, the soldiers filled the streets with khaki brown, and sailors too in white and blue, the glory of my town. My elder brothers all had gone to wear a uniform. I feared for them, but never feared they would do any harm. I knew them brave and kind. I knew them good and nothing more. How should a child conceive the wrong that is the soul of war? None of them killed, and none was killed. And when their job was done, in hope and pride, we welcomed them and said the war was won. When I had children of my own, soldiers were dressed like clowns in camouflage, and no parades went thumping through the towns. No, it was we who marched instead, and we who beat the drum. Women and old men, motley, wild, all shouting, "Bring them home." They brought them home. Some were alive, but all had come to grief. And silence met each one, and shame as for a coward or thief. We failed them in righteousness, withdrawing our goodwill from the blind courage that obeyed the blind command to kill. Yet, in all truth, they failed us, as young men ever have, who take the order from old men to dig our common grave. So now my children's children see their brothers in the mud and tortured prisoners, and streets a marsh of human blood. And it will be in years to come as in the years before. The innocent accept the wrong that is the soul of war. And soldiers still will fill the towns in blue or khaki clad. The brave, the good, who march to kill what hope we ever had. It keeps sliding around.
How about we do this? Does that work? If we move it over a little bit? That might work a little bit better.
That would be wonderful. Thank
Oh,
you. Thanks a lot. Okay, and one more kind of in this vein. This one's rather long. It's called The Curse of the Prophetess. Hear my curse on the nation of Israel and the nation of Palestine. May the generals of your armies be little, heavy-burdened donkeys, and your leaders be patient old sheep. May you listen discriminately to your God, testing the validity of the transmissions and heeding not his calls to vengeance. May your women go bareheaded in his presence and dance in his temples, and may their wombs be fruitful in girl children. May your young men take no joy in combat, and your old men be fearful for them, saying, "Is it right that my son give his life for me? Am I a better man than he is? Nay, let him live to be a shepherd, or garage mechanic, or professor of ancient languages. Let the child set down the stone in his hand and be allowed to learn to make bricks for the building of houses. Let the mouths that spit forth missiles be stopped with earth. Let those who give their lives to destroy other lives be called not heroes but murderers, the disgrace of their people. Let the day come, let it come now, when the name warrior will be a name of folly, and the word victory mean a vain thing. Let the day come, let it come now, when the wine of intolerant belief is poured out on the sand, so that all may drink from the well they share with their neighbor. The wine of belief is strong, driving mad those who drink it. The wine of hatred is like wormwood. They who drink it cannot cease drinking. May the grapes of those vineyards rot on the vines. May the casks of the vintners burst asunder, May the vintners be ashamed of their folly. Then, may your peoples go to the well in the marketplace and draw water together. Go out into the desert seeking the well springs, conversing together, forgetful of old wrongs, remembering kinship. Let them speak long together of justice, and kneel down then to drink from the wells and springs that are life in that desert, praising the giver of the holy waters. And may this curse be upon you and your sons and your daughters to the 9th generation. Well, to make a little change of tone here. As a poet, insofar as I am a poet, I am interested in what poets now call form, which means, well, the form the poem is written in. And a form as such usually means writing in metrical or rhymed verse. And I was born in 1929, and unthinkably long ago. And as a kid, what I read was mostly metered and rhymed verse, and so that's what I wrote when I was young. When I was a young poet, I mostly wrote in meter and rhyme. And then it sort of, I began to realize that that's not what American poets were doing. And we had free verse, and we were supposed to be free. And so all my life, I've sort of been between the two. But in my old age, somewhere in my 60s, I guess, I got into a peer group of poets. And I'm still there. Some of the poets are the same, some of them have changed. But anyway, it's been a very important thing to me to be in this group. We meet once a month, and we give each other an assignment once a month. And we bring poems next month and read them out loud, and everybody in the group talks about them and sees if they can make them better. It's a wonderful thing. It's the kind of thing writers, well, some writers need it. Always, some writers need it part of the time. Most writers need something like this some of the time. Feedback. Anyway, I discovered that a lot of the assignments were, write a sonnet, write a villanelle. What's a villanelle? Quick look in your Louis Turco Book of Forms. And what I discovered was kind of a major discovery was that the form would give me the substance of the poem. That I am a poet who thrives on form. And there are many of us. So if somebody tells you don't rhyme it or don't meter it or that's old-fashioned or something, forget it. Write it the way you need to write. And very often, it is amazing how the form gives you the poem. I do not understand this at all, but maybe we can talk about it afterwards. That poem, Extinction, was a villanelle, which is a poem on just two rhymes with certain set repetitions. It was a loose one. Soldiers was a ballad. When I was about 10, I read Oscar Wilde's The Ballad of Reading Jail, and it had quite an impression on me. And the next poem is a song. It's called Every Land, and the quotation is from Black Elk, great Indian visionary who said, "The Holy Land is everywhere." Watch where the branches of the willows bend, see where the waters of the rivers tend, graves in the rock, cradles in the sand, every land is the Holy Land. Here was the battle to the bitter end. Here's where the enemy killed the friend. Blood on the rock, tears on the sand. Every land is the Holy Land. Willow by the water, bending in the wind, bent till it's broken and it cannot stand. Listen to the word the messengers send, life from the living rock, death in the sand. Every land is the Holy Land. And this bunch I will end with a slightly older poem called Futurology. I'm always, because I have written science fiction, people are always saying, oh, you know all about the future. Aye. So the title's a little bit ironical or sarcastic here. I cannot break free from these iron stars. I want the raspberry paw pads of the fox, but here are only claws. The crab, the scorpion, great shining signs that slide across the sky. I want the wisdom ignorant of wars and the soft key that opens all the locks. I want the touch of fur, the slant of sun deep in a golden slotted changing eye. Oh, let there be no signs. Let fall the bars and walls be moss-grown, scattered rocks. Let all the evil we have done be done, and minds lie still as sunlit meadows lie. That poem, by the way, was written in a form, the name of which I love. It's called rima dissoluta, dissolute rhyme. And all it means is that the end words in a stanza, those rhymes are repeated in the next stanza, but they don't rhyme within the stanza. And it's a very interesting form. It leads to a kind of long breath. It's fun to play with. I recommend it. Okay, here come 4 poems about art, about writing stuff. This one's called English. I love my native language, the lovely viola, the great advantage. A mouthful of pebbles, a welling of water, crash bangs, faint echoes. The word, if you can find it, for what is and what is beyond it. I do love English. I just feel I'm so lucky being born to speak it. This one is about, well, it's kind of about 2 of the things I do, one of which is write fantasies and the other is write poetry. It's called Almost and Always. Almost they were the amethyst mountains and the clear, faint hollowing of horns in far forests over the twilight border, and faded into daylight and the noise of traffic. Always the half-guessed miraculous line trembled on the edge of being in this language and was almost, and faded into the expectable, ordinary poem. Let's see, where am I? I have all sorts of little guides here to keep me from looking through the book continuously. Okay, now this poem grew from one of, I told you my poetry group, we give each other assignments. And this assignment was a real, we were supposed to write about Lorca's Duende. Well, okay, the great Spanish poet, Lorca. Well, what's a duende? So I had to do a lot of Googling and stuff. And so I found out something about what Lorca meant by duende, but, well, okay, this is the poem that came out of it. Lorca's Duende. The duende got into my head by the back staircase. A gypsy girl child dressed in red with an old man's face. My bedroom turned bitter cold. There were banging noises, loud knockings in between the walls. Things left their places. My comb crawled across the bureau, clicking like castanets. My grandmother's ivory-backed mirror cracked itself into bits. Get out of my head, old child. Te exorcizo. Take your tricks and your wild ways back to Andalusia. Go home, poltergeist, and do Spanish damage. I have my own bad guests that speak my own bad language. It's amazing what an incomprehensible assignment can give you. This one, okay. This one is called She Remembers the Famous Poet. And it's a little riff on two very famous poems. One is by the Renaissance French poet Ronsard. And the first line is Quand vous serez bien vieille au soir à la chandelle. And the great Irish poet Yeats picked it up and wrote a sonnet, When you are old and gray and full of sleep. And the subject is the woman who was very beautiful when she was young, thinking about the famous poet who loved her, remembered her. So she remembers the famous poet. Now I am old and gray and sit alone beside my fire. I think of lovely boys I knew when I was young and fair. And some of them wrote poems about my eyes and their desire. My winsome Irish Willie and my gallant French Pierre. It makes me smile to think about how we made love and all the tender things they told me as I gaze into the flames these winter nights. But Lord, I never can recall a single word of all they wrote, or even their last names. Revenge is sweet. Okay, now, you know, I didn't realize I was going to have a lot of young people tonight. So I'm kind of sorry because the whole end of this is going to be poems about getting old. Well, and you know, you don't want to hear about it. And you're right. But I'm 83. And to me, that's a great age. I guess everybody says, oh, no, everybody's just 95 now, you know, well, whatever. I feel that at my age, I am kind of obliged to bear witness. In a sense, there are an awful lot of people, a lot of people, who have not been where I am and have not gone where I've had to go. And in a sense, I think people who get old who can do it need to make reports from the frontier. Like bring the Dutch oven, but don't bring the grand piano. You know? I don't know. So anyway, so from here on, it's kind of reports from the frontier. And this next poem is kind of difficult. It's dedicated to Naomi, and that means Naomi Raplansky. Does anybody here know this poet? Nobody? Okay, Naomi is now in her 90s and has been writing as a poet and a leftist her whole life, and she just published a book of her selected poems, and I do recommend it. Naomi is a quite remarkable poet. We somehow became pen pals, and you know, on the internet. And we got to talking about how when you get old, we both had been looking at our body as sort of like it was like a parent getting old, a kind of somebody who held us up and supported us for so long, who isn't doing it anymore. It's sort of a failing. And this poem seems to need this explanation because the first line, I talk about the mother body, and they all hear it as the mother's body, and it's not the mother's body, my mother body, my body. So, my mother body held me tight. I sucked the flowing world from her, the sweet air, the warm light, and she sang sleep to me at night. There's no more comfort in her breast, and only distance in her arms. She no longer holds me close. Go on, she sings now, little ghost. Did I go off? No, okay. It popped alarmingly. And this one is called A Request. Should my tongue be tied by stroke, listen to me as if I spoke and said to you, my dear, my friend, stay here a while and take my hand. My voice is hindered by this clot, but silence says what I cannot. And you can answer as you please such undemanding words as these. Or let our conversation be a mute and patient amity, sitting, all the words bygone, like a stone beside a stone. It takes a while to learn to talk. It takes a while to learn to talk the long language of the rock. When people talk about being spry and being feisty and old age is not for sissies and all that stuff, you know, okay, I understand why you have to do it. But a great deal of getting old consists of loss. And there's no use pretending it doesn't, or you won't be able to handle it. Well, that sounds so, I'm sorry, that's predictive, that's prescriptive. Anyway, a lot of getting old consists of losing people. Sometimes it seems, is the name of this poem. Sometimes it seems so deep, the emptiness within an open grave. Yet earth fills it with earth. No loss makes less. The rising wave lifts from the hollow wave. The earth is deep and sweet. My heart's at fault for seeing any waste. But still the sea is salt and tears are salt. Sometimes it seems that salt is all I taste. In the borderlands. Now, this report from the frontier, I haven't quite heard anybody else make. So maybe this is just me. In the borderlands, the part of this being that is rock, the part of this body that is star, lately I feel them yearning to go back and be what they are. As we get closer to the border, They whisper sometimes to my soul, so long we've been away from order, oh, when will we be whole? Soon enough, my soul replies, you'll shine in star and sleep in stone, when I, who troubled you a while with eyes and grief and wakefulness, am gone. This poem was written. My husband, who is a couple of years older than me, and I tried to take a plane to San Francisco, which doesn't seem that hard, you know. You get on the plane, you get off. Well, we had a 12-hour wait at Portland Airport. And what we had done with the intelligence of old age was pack our cell phones in our suitcases, which you could put aboard the plane, you know. So we were sort of there. The Arts of Old Age, written in the airport. I learn the arts of old age day by day. The expertise of being lame, the sense of unimpatient impotence, the irony of all accomplishments, the silent, furtive welcome of delay. Okay, now moving on towards, I guess as far towards religion as somebody like me ever gets. I wrote once that I was raised as irreligious as a coyote, and that's about the truth of it. A God I know. A God I know moves very slowly, not like Zeus's lightning crack or Satan's cell phones. No, he travels like an inchworm, measuring the eternal terms, and every inch is holy. He goes slowly, and often he turns back. I know him only in my bones. And this is January night prayer. We live in northwest Portland, where we don't get quite as much gorge wind as you do on the east side here, but when it comes, that wind, you know, it's different. This was gorge wind in winter. Bell chimes jangle. Freakish wind whistles icy out of desert lands over the mountains. Janus, lord of winter and beginnings, riven and shaken with two faces. Watcher at the gates of winds and cities. God of the wakeful. Keep me from cold-handed envy and petty anger. Open my soul to the vast dark places. Say to me, say again, nothing is taken, only given. And the last poem I will read is called Votum. Let it be clear, a clear day from the eastern ridges to the sea. Let the oak be dropping its long, fragile flowers onto the ground under the branches. Let no cloud gather in the sky, no wind disturb the fall of the flowers. Let the shadow lie under the branches, silent on the ground. Let the oak outlive me by 100 flowerings. Thank you. We can do Q&A. And I stand here. It's okay? Okay. It's really dark at the back. I cannot see the back at all. So, yeah, oh, there's a hand there. No, okay. Yes. There was a hand. Do.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your transition from prose to poetry.
Oh, it was the other way around. I started writing at 5, and it was poetry. My brother taught me to write, and okay, yeah. So I wrote only poetry for 3 or 4 years, and then stories are so long, when you're 6 or 7 or 8. Poems are nice and short, and they kind of bounce. I've always written poetry. I really started writing stories. I started trying to write stories at about 10, I think, and got serious at about 15, and got printed at 29, published. I published poetry long before I published prose. But, you publish in little magazines and who knows. Yeah. So it's always, I've never understood I can understand why you might do only one, but some, particularly poets, seem to feel that it's sort of wicked to write prose. And some prose writers think, well, poets, And that I don't know, that's just bigotry.
Do you have a writing discipline? Set times you write?
Must I answer this question? It's a good question, and I know a lot of people love to hear a good answer, but the trouble is, I don't have a discipline. I just have a compulsion, which I try to be ready to obey.
That's a good answer.
I just finished reading The Ones Who Walk from Malice. She published in 1973. Do you remember that in particular?
Oh, yeah.
And I was wondering, it was a time of the Vietnam conflict, and the ones who were walking away, were those the people who protested the draft in your mind, or praying?
No, that would be too specific. Although I pronounce it Omelas, but the ones who walk away from Omelas. If you don't know the plot, I stole it from William James and Dostoevsky. It's a moral problem in the form of a very short story. I was probably in the place where I wanted to write that story because of the Vietnam War, because I was protesting it weekly down in the downtown Portland. But it's such a general problem of the essential gimmick of the story is that if you have a absolutely lovely civilization for which only one single person has to do any suffering, wouldn't that be grand? It's the Grand Inquisitor asks this question in the Brother Karamazov, but William James is the man who posed it first. And the story has been republished more than any other of my stories because it's used by teachers in all sorts of English and other disciplines to irritate their students and make them talk. It's still irritating students. I get letters from them saying, well, of course you'd do something to turn that poor child free. I mean, of course, Anyway.
So who irritated you when you were a student?
Oh, lots of people. Ernest Hemingway. Lots of people still irritate me.
Tell us a little about your undergraduate, graduate studies.
I was in French, not English, so this would not be very apposite. I very carefully stayed out of English so that I wouldn't be told what to read in my own language, because I felt I had to choose that myself. This was kind of semi-blind instinct. Whereas if I read it in French, I couldn't possibly imitate it or be influenced by it deeply, so that was just a pleasure. So my reading was mostly my own choice, so I stayed away from those who irritated me. Unlike writers who do English, and then they have to read the people they despise and loathe, or the people just a little older than they are, who are the most irritating ones, you know, sort of your parents' generation. T.S. Eliot, I knew, of course I knew he was a great poet, but I had to grow up completely before I could really read Eliot. Yeah. But meanwhile, he got into me because he's a great poet. Whereas Dylan Thomas, who is actually very much nearer my generation, who just died very young. Oh my Lord, I heard him read. Actually, it's one of the recordings of Dylan Thomas readings. It's at Columbia University, about 1950 probably. I was in that audience, and I walked out of there about 4 feet above the ground. Oh my God. You know, that's what poetry is. Yeah.
Yes. You've had many of your writings turned into films and TV programs, and
We have to go there.
but you've also had a lot of your poetry and other writings turned into sets of music. And is that something that you enjoy? Does it change too much, or does it amplify your poetry?
I love it. I don't always like the music or the tune they put my words to. Doesn't go that way, you know. But collaboration is a fascinating thing, and collaboration between arts. I don't collaborate hardly at all with other writers. I just can't. I'm too willful. But most writers are, actually. Collaboration between writers is an extraordinary phenomenon. But working with a composer or dancers, which I had the great privilege of doing once, or actors, just learning how they perceive the whole thing so differently. Dancers were fascinating to me because they're so unverbal, and they do it all with their body. But yeah, that's it. You're doing what my poem was trying to do. You know? And of course, in music, I have to sort of say, yeah, okay, it's another way of coming at it. The problem, I think, with film is they use the words, but then they don't respect them, usually. They don't respect what they're doing. And so I've had one good filmic experience, and that was the Lathe of Heaven that was made in 1980 by a public broadcasting affiliate. And since then it's been, why did you even call it by the name of my book? You know. So that's very strange, and that's a pity because I love movies. And I found out when we were making The Lathe of Heaven, I found out the whole choreography that goes into making a movie, and it's fascinating. And it involves hundreds of very talented people, you know, to making even a low-budget, simple movie like that. All these people involved, all collaborating with one another. So we ought to get better stuff than we do.
thesis piece I wrote, a thesis entitled A Cure for Dracophobia, based largely off of your piece, Why Are Americans Afraid of Dragons, and some other bits. I posited fantastical allegory and all these things, trying to make a case for studying fantasy in a college environment. And I find that too often you have a situation where the ideas are so grandiose, but the characters and the mood of a piece kind of leave more traditional acting as sort of like, oh, I don't want to bother with that. So I was just wondering, because your characters so often just stick in my mind, how it is you find that balance.
Well, thank you. I don't know, is that a lot of fantastic or science fiction writing is actually rather far over on the satire end. Now, academics don't criticize Swift because the characters in Swift's Gulliver's Travels are a bit one-sided, or, you know, they're not exactly deep novel characters. They're satirical. So I think sometimes people try to read fantasy and science fiction as something it's not, that particular piece is not. They try to read it as a realistic novel. Well, it's not a realistic novel. It's a piece of fantasy or a piece of science fiction or whatever. It may be a satirical one. It may be an idea piece, in which case you're not looking for the characters. You're looking for the idea and how well the author works it out. You know, the big problem with critics and academe and genre literature is they don't read it, they don't know how to read it, and they say it's not worth reading. Well, that's the wrong order. Because essentially their conviction that it's not worth reading came first. And so they don't read it, and then they talk about it and say, well, it's not worth reading. Well, they don't know. Over and over, I have talked to academics who haven't read any science fiction and fantasy. Well, no, we don't read that. It's not literature. Yes, it is. Any novel, essentially, any novel is literature. It may be very bad literature. I read a lot of realism that is just, you know, come on. What makes literature is quality, not genre. And the fact that it's realism does not excerpt it from being a genre. It's the realistic genre, that's all it is. This whole argument about the worthiness of various genres is breaking down so fast now. And I'm so happy to see it breaking down. Writers like Michael Chabon and so on are just tearing it all to pieces. Yeah.
Shall we take one more question?
Sure.
In Lavinia, you talked about the influence that Virgil had on your poetry and how much you appreciated the Latin poets. And I wonder what contemporary poets that you read or that kind of move you the way that Virgil does and Ovid does now.
Well, that's a little bit backwards because, you know, my life's a little backwards that way because I wasn't able to read Latin until I got very old, in my 70s. And Ovid is still pretty difficult for me. I just fell in love with Virgil. And falling in love with a writer is how you read it. You know, if you fall in love, then you can even read Latin. The poets who've meant a lot to me they're just so many. But it's always kind of fun to name one that is not very fashionable at the moment that has meant an enormous amount to me. And I think tonight I will mention A.E. Housman. My whole life has just been in my heart, you know, since I was 13. So, thank you very much. This has been a great time.